20,000 years ago, when the galaxy trembled at humanity's name, one ship disappeared into the void carrying secrets that could reshape the cosmos itself. The Eternal Wanderer vanished during humanity's darkest hour, taking with it the last hope of a dying civilization. Alien empires rose and fell in the millennia that followed, each one telling hushed stories of the ghost ship that haunted the space between stars. They called it a myth, a legend born from fear and imagination. The humans were extinct, they said. Their technology was primitive. Their ship was nothing more than space debris floating in the cosmic dark. But legends have a way of coming home. When the Eternal Wanderer's impossible signature appeared on long-range sensors across 3 star systems simultaneously, it didn't just announce its return. It declared that humanity's greatest secret was about to be unleashed upon a galaxy that had forgotten why they once feared the name of Earth. The ghost ship had awakened. And, with it, the true power that made humans the most terrifying force the universe had ever known. The first detection came from the Zephyrian monitoring station at the edge of the Andromeda Spiral. Sensor technician Vex 9 had been running routine deep space scans when his equipment registered something that made his 3 hearts skip in perfect synchronization. The energy signature was impossible, ancient, and absolutely terrifying. Vex 9 stared at his screens with compound eyes that had seen 30 years of space traffic. Commercial vessels, military cruisers, even the occasional pirate ship. Nothing had ever made his sensors scream warnings like this. The reading showed a massive object moving through space at speeds that violated every known law of physics. More disturbing was the energy output. It registered as pure quantum flux, a technology that existed only in theoretical documents buried deep in the galactic archives. Commander Zix Prime, Vex 9 called across the monitoring station, his voice translator struggling to convert his panic into standard galactic. You need to see this immediately. Commander Zix Prime glided over on his repulsor chair, his metallic exoskeleton gleaming under the station's artificial lighting. As leader of Border Station Omega 7, he had seen enough false alarms to last several lifetimes. Young technicians were always jumping at shadows, mistaking asteroid movements for invasion fleets. What seems to be the problem, technician? Zix Prime asked, his mechanical voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. Vex 9 pointed a trembling tentacle at his primary display. Sir, I'm reading a massive object approximately 40,000 kilometers in length. It's moving at 0.7 light speed without any detectable propulsion system. The energy readings are off every scale we have. Zix Prime's optical sensors focused on the display. For a long moment, he said nothing. The readings were indeed extraordinary. The object appeared to be a ship of some kind, but its size dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. The largest dreadnoughts built by the Dominion Alliance measured barely 8 kilometers from bow to stern. This thing was 5 times longer than their biggest space stations. Run a full spectrum analysis, Zix Prime ordered. Cross-reference the energy signature with our historical databases. And send an immediate alert to Sector Command. They need to know about this. As Vex 9 worked frantically at his console, the commander continued studying the readings. Something about the energy signature felt familiar, like a half-remembered nightmare from his academy training. Deep in the classified sections of galactic military history, there were stories. Legends of a race that had once challenged the gods themselves and paid the ultimate price for their arrogance. The database search completed with a soft chime that sounded like a funeral bell in the suddenly quiet station. Vex 9's face went pale, which was remarkable for a being whose natural skin color resembled charcoal. Sir, Vex 9 whispered, the computer has identified the energy signature. It's a match for theoretical human quantum drive technology. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Every being in the galaxy knew the stories of the humans, though most dismissed them as mythology. They had been the first species to achieve true interstellar travel, the first to master quantum mechanics on a macro scale. They had built ships that could cross the galaxy in days rather than years. They had terraformed dead worlds and created artificial suns. And then, 20,000 years ago, they had simply vanished. Zix Prime felt his servos lock up in shock. According to every historical record, the humans had destroyed themselves in a civil war that lasted 3 centuries. Their homeworld was a burned-out cinder. Their colonies were empty ruins scattered across the outer rim. The few artifacts that remained were locked away in the deepest vaults of the Galactic Museum, too dangerous for public display. Are you certain of this reading? Zix Prime asked, though he already knew the answer. Vex 9 was the best sensor technician in the sector. If he said the readings were accurate, they were accurate. Confirmed, sir. The signature is identical to theoretical human quantum drive emissions. But, sir, there's something else. The ship isn't just moving. It's scanning everything in its path. Every planet, every moon, every piece of space debris. It's looking for something. Before Zix Prime could respond, alerts began screaming across the station. Similar readings were coming in from monitoring posts throughout the sector. The massive ship wasn't alone. It was followed by a fleet of smaller vessels, each one broadcasting the same impossible energy signature. Contact the Dominion fleet immediately, Zix Prime ordered. Tell them we have a code black situation. And send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them the humans have returned. As emergency signals raced across subspace networks, the mysterious fleet continued its journey toward the galactic core. On the bridge of the lead vessel, beings that had once been human but were now something far more advanced monitored the galaxy's response to their return. Captain Sarah Chun had been dead for 19,000 years. Her body had failed during the long journey through the void between galaxies, but her consciousness lived on in the ship's quantum matrix. She watched through the vessel's sensors as panic spread across dozens of worlds. They remember us, she said to her crew, though her words were transmitted as pure thought through the ship's neural network. After all this time, they still remember. Her first officer, Marcus Rodriguez, existed as a patterns of quantum energy interfaced with the ship's targeting systems. Should we slow our approach, Captain? Their military forces are mobilizing. Sarah's consciousness touched the ship's memory banks, accessing 20,000 years of recorded history. She saw the rise and fall of a dozen galactic empires. She witnessed wars that consumed entire star systems and peace treaties that lasted mere centuries. She observed species that had evolved, transcended, or destroyed themselves while humanity drifted in the void. No, she decided. We've been gone long enough. It's time to remind them why they feared us. The Eternal Wanderer and its escort fleet continued their relentless advance toward the galactic core. Behind them, space seemed to ripple with residual quantum energy. Ahead, the combined fleets of 7 major galactic powers rushed to form a defensive line. None of them understood what they were truly facing. The beings aboard the human ships were no longer bound by the limitations of flesh and bone. They had spent 20 millennia in the void between galaxies, learning from the ancient machines they found drifting in the cosmic dark. They had evolved beyond physical existence, becoming something that was part consciousness, part energy, and part pure will. As the first reports reached the Galactic Council chambers on the capital world of Centrium Prime, emergency sessions convened across the galaxy. Military commanders who had never faced a real threat began dusting off contingency plans written by their predecessors. Diplomats who specialized in trade negotiations suddenly found themselves preparing for the return of a species that had once made the stars themselves tremble. On the outermost edge of civilized space, automated defense platforms powered up for the first time in centuries. Ancient weapons designed to stop threats that no longer existed began charging their exotic matter cannons. Early warning networks that had been maintained more out of tradition than necessity suddenly became the galaxy's first and last line of defense. But none of it would matter. The beings returning from the void had learned secrets that made their ancient quantum drives look like children's toys. They had discovered technologies that existed at the intersection of science and magic, weapons that could unmake matter at the subatomic level, and defenses that turned the laws of physics into mere suggestions. The Eternal Wanderer's sensors detected the massive military buildup ahead. Thousands of ships from dozens of species were converging on their projected path. Orbital defense platforms were cycling through power-up sequences. Planetary shields were being raised on every inhabited world within 50 light-years. Sarah Chen's consciousness expanded through the ship's neural network, touching the minds of her crew. They had been together for so long that individual thoughts had begun to merge into a collective awareness. Each member retained their personality, but they also shared a common purpose that transcended individual desire. They're trying to stop us, Marcus observed, his consciousness interfacing with the ship's tactical systems. Shall we demonstrate our capabilities? Not yet, Sarah replied. Let them gather their forces. Let them feel confident in their numbers. When we finally show them what we've become, I want the entire galaxy to witness it. The fleet maintained its steady advance, neither accelerating nor slowing. Their quantum drives left ripples in space-time that sensitive equipment could detect from several star systems away. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend around their passage, creating gravitational anomalies that confused navigation computers across the sector. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins had been the expedition's chief scientist when they departed Earth 20,000 years ago. Now her consciousness existed as pure information within the ship's research networks. She had spent the long journey studying the fundamental forces of the universe, learning from artifacts and technologies they discovered in the void between galaxies. Captain, she transmitted, I'm detecting significant technological advancement among the local species. They've achieved faster-than-light communication and developed rudimentary energy shields. However, their understanding of quantum mechanics remains surprisingly primitive. Primitive compared to what we were when we left, or primitive compared to what we've become? Sarah asked. Both, Elizabeth replied. Their most advanced weapons are based on principles we mastered 30,000 years ago. They've essentially remained static while we've had 20 millennia to evolve. The realization sent a wave of satisfaction through the collective consciousness of the crew. They had left a galaxy torn apart by war and chaos, fleeing into the unknown rather than watching their civilization destroy itself. Now they returned to find a universe that had advanced barely beyond the level of their ancient enemies. Begin passive scans of their communication networks, Sarah ordered. I want to understand what's happened here since we left. Who rules these stars now? What happened to Earth? Are there any other human survivors? As the ship's systems began intercepting and analyzing thousands of communication channels, a picture of the current galactic situation began to emerge. The Dominion Alliance controlled the core worlds through a combination of military might and economic manipulation. The Zephyrian Federation held the Outer Rim territories, focusing on exploration and research. Dozens of smaller powers controlled their own sectors, maintaining an uneasy peace through a complex web of treaties and trade agreements. But nowhere in the vast network of civilizations was there any mention of humans. Earth was listed in historical databases as a dead world, its location classified for reasons none of the current governments seemed to understand. The few human artifacts that remained were treated as archaeological curiosities, their true purpose lost to time. We've been erased, Marcus observed, processing the intercepted data. They've written us out of history. Not erased, Sarah corrected. Forgotten. There's a difference. Erasure is deliberate. What happened to us is something much more dangerous. We've become a myth, a story told to frighten children and justify military budgets. The distinction was important. Myths could be dismissed, ignored, or misunderstood. But myths also had power. They shaped behavior and influenced decisions in ways that their creators never intended. The galaxy had spent 20,000 years telling stories about the terrible humans who had once challenged the natural order. Those stories had taken on lives of their own, becoming warnings about the dangers of unchecked ambition and technological advancement. Now the humans were returning to reclaim their legend. As the Eternal Wanderer approached the outer edge of civilized space, its sensors detected the first of many defensive formations waiting ahead. The combined fleet was impressive by any standard. Over 15,000 vessels arranged in a complex defensive matrix, supported by orbital weapon platforms and planetary defense systems. It was the largest military force assembled in the galaxy for over 3,000 years. Every major power had contributed ships and personnel. Ancient rivalries had been set aside in the face of a threat that transcended politics and territorial disputes. Sarah studied the defensive formation through the ship's tactical networks. The arrangement showed both sophistication and desperation. These beings clearly understood they were facing something beyond their normal experience, but they had no frame of reference for the true scale of the threat approaching them. "Shall we attempt communication?" asked Commander James Park, who had been the expedition's diplomatic officer. His consciousness now existed within the ship's communication systems, capable of translating and interpreting signals across dozens of species and languages. Yes, Sarah decided. But not yet. Let them wait. Let them wonder. Fear makes beings receptive to negotiation in ways that confidence never could. The Eternal Wanderer maintained its course and speed, approaching the defensive line with the inevitability of a natural force. Behind it, the smaller ships of the human fleet spread out in a formation that suggested both protection and preparation for battle. On the bridge of the Dominion flagship Retribution, Admiral Kexthane studied the approaching vessels with growing unease. His tactical officers had run every simulation they could devise, and none of them produced favorable outcomes. The human ships showed no reaction to target locks, no response to communication attempts, and no indication that they were even aware of the massive military force arrayed against them. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're still receiving no response to our hails. They're maintaining course and speed. Estimate contact in 6 hours." Admiral Kexthane was a veteran of the Outer Rim conflicts and the War of Succession. He had commanded fleets in battles that decided the fate of entire sectors. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for this moment. "Continue broadcasting on all frequencies," he ordered, "and send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we may be about to witness the beginning of a new age, whether we want to or not." As the hours ticked away and the distance between the fleets decreased, tension spread through both formations like a contagious disease. On one side, beings who had spent their entire lives believing they represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. On the other, consciousnesses that had transcended physical existence and learned secrets that could reshape reality itself. The confrontation that was about to unfold would determine not just the balance of power in the galaxy, but the very nature of existence itself. The humans had returned, but they were no longer the species that had fled into the void 20,000 years ago. They had become something new, something unprecedented, something that would force every being in the galaxy to question everything they thought they knew about life, death, and the possibilities that lay beyond both. The Eternal Wanderer continued its approach, and with each passing moment, the galaxy held its breath. The first communication from the Eternal Wanderer came not as words or signals, but as pure understanding that suddenly filled the minds of every being within 50 light years. It was not telepathy in any conventional sense, but rather a direct transfer of concepts that bypassed language entirely. Every consciousness in the combined defensive fleet suddenly knew, with absolute certainty, that they were about to witness something that would redefine their understanding of what was possible. Admiral Kexthane felt the knowledge settle into his mind like ice water in his veins. The beings approaching them were not merely advanced humans. They had become something that existed at the intersection of consciousness and quantum reality, entities that could manipulate the fundamental forces of existence through will alone. "All ships, stand down from attack posture," the Admiral commanded, his voice carrying across the communication network with an authority born of sudden, terrible understanding. "Repeat, all vessels are to power down weapons and defensive systems immediately." The order created chaos across the combined fleet. Ship commanders who had spent months preparing for this confrontation suddenly found themselves ordered to disable their only means of protection. Voices erupted across the communication channels, demanding explanations and expressing disbelief. "Admiral, with respect, what are your orders based on?" asked Captain Dex, 7 of the Zephyrian battlecruiser Starforge. "We have no data to suggest these vessels are anything other than a potential threat." Before Admiral Kexthane could respond, the space around the defensive fleet began to change. Reality itself seemed to ripple as the Eternal Wanderer approached, its massive form becoming visible not through conventional sensors, but through a kind of awareness that transcended normal perception. The ship was simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced, its hull composed of materials that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. Dr. Elena Vasquez of the Terran Research Institute had been monitoring the situation from the science vessel Discovery. As one of the galaxy's leading experts on ancient technologies, she had been specifically requested to observe and analyze the approaching vessels. What she witnessed defied every principle of physics she had spent her life studying. "The ship is phasing in and out of our dimensional space," she reported to the Fleet Command Network. "It appears to exist primarily in quantum space, manifesting in normal reality only when necessary. This explains why our sensors have been unable to maintain consistent locks." The implications were staggering. A vessel capable of existing primarily as quantum probability meant that conventional weapons would be useless against it. Energy beams would pass harmlessly through quantum space. Kinetic projectiles would find no solid target to impact. Even nuclear weapons would fail to damage something that could selectively interact with physical reality. As if responding to their thoughts, the Eternal Wanderer fully materialized in normal space for the first time since its approach began. The ship was a masterpiece of impossible engineering, its hull flowing with patterns that seemed to move independently of the vessel's motion. Viewing ports glowed with inner light that suggested vast spaces within, chambers that could contain entire ecosystems or house consciousnesses beyond counting. Captain Sarah Chen's presence filled the space between the fleets like a gentle tide. When she spoke, her voice reached every mind simultaneously, carrying with it the weight of 20,000 years of accumulated wisdom and experience. "Beings of this galaxy," she began, her words creating harmonics that resonated on frequencies both audible and psychic. "We are the descendants of those you call the humans. We have returned from the spaces between galaxies, carrying with us knowledge and capabilities that your species have yet to imagine. We come not as conquerors, but as those who would restore balance to a universe that has forgotten its true potential." The response from the fleet was immediate and varied. Some ships began powering down their weapons as ordered, while others maintained defensive postures despite their commanders' growing uncertainty. Communication channels filled with urgent discussions as military leaders tried to process what they were experiencing. Commander Marcus Rodriguez manifested his consciousness as a visible presence near the Eternal Wanderer's hull, appearing as a figure composed of pure energy that somehow conveyed both human form and transcendent power. He addressed the assembled fleet with the patience of one who had learned to think in cosmic time frames. "You fear us because your histories speak of our potential for destruction," he said, his voice carrying across space without need for radio transmission. "But understand this. The beings who left this galaxy 20,000 years ago were children compared to what we have become. We have learned that true power lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the capacity to create, to nurture, and to guide evolution itself." To demonstrate their point, the human fleet began a display that would be remembered for millennia to come. The smaller vessels that accompanied the Eternal Wanderer began to transform, their hulls flowing like liquid metal as they reconfigured themselves into entirely new forms. Ships became gardens, floating through space with impossible ecosystems contained within transparent shells. Others transformed into geometric sculptures that bent light and gravity around them, creating beautiful and impossible effects that painted the void with colors that had no names. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins projected her consciousness across the space between fleets, her presence manifesting as a gentle warmth that touched the minds of scientists and researchers throughout the combined forces. She shared with them glimpses of the knowledge humanity had acquired during their long exile, technologies that could terraform dead worlds in decades rather than centuries, methods for creating stable wormholes between distant galaxies, techniques for transcending the barrier between consciousness and pure energy. "Your species have achieved much in our absence," she communicated to the gathered scientists. "You have learned to travel between stars, to communicate across vast distances, to create artificial intelligences, and modify your own genetic structures. But you have remained bound by the assumption that consciousness and matter are separate phenomena. We have learned to move beyond that limitation." The revelation sent shock waves through the scientific community represented in the fleet. For centuries, the fundamental question of consciousness had remained unsolved. Philosophers and researchers had debated whether awareness emerged from complex material interactions or existed as a separate phenomenon altogether. The humans were suggesting that the question itself was based on a false premise. As the demonstration continued, the Eternal Wanderer itself began to change. Sections of its hull became transparent, revealing internal spaces that defied conventional understanding of architecture and engineering. Chambers that were simultaneously vast halls and intimate spaces, corridors that seemed to fold back on themselves while somehow connecting distant sections of the ship. Gardens that contained ecosystems from a dozen worlds, all thriving in the same environmental conditions through technologies that made terraforming obsolete. Most impressive were the beings within. The human consciousness that inhabited the ship had taken forms that were recognizably human, yet transcendently beautiful. They moved through the vessel's spaces as both individuals and as part of a greater collective awareness, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy as their needs demanded. Admiral Kexthane found himself forced to reconsider every assumption he had made about the nature of the confrontation. His weapons were not merely useless against these beings, they were irrelevant. The humans had moved beyond the need for traditional defenses, beyond the limitations of physical form, beyond the constraints that defined existence for every other known species. "What do you want from us?" he asked, broadcasting his question across all frequencies. It was a simple question, but one that carried the weight of an entire galaxy's fear and hope. Sarah Chen's presence focused on the Admiral with the intensity of a star. When she responded, her words carried 20 millennia of patience and understanding. "We want nothing from you," she replied. "We offer everything to you. The technologies we have mastered, the knowledge we have gained, the wisdom we have earned through our journey into the void. Your species have the potential to transcend your current limitations, to become more than you have ever imagined possible. But that potential can only be realized through choice, never through force." The offer hung in space between the fleets like a bridge between two different realities. On one side, billions of beings bound by the limitations of physical existence, struggling with scarcity, conflict, and the inevitable approach of death. On the other, consciousnesses that had learned to exist beyond such constraints, offering to share their transcendence with anyone willing to accept it. But transcendence, as every species quickly realized, meant the end of everything they currently understood as normal existence. The humans were not offering improvements to their current lives. They were offering transformation so complete that the resulting beings would barely resemble their original forms. Captain Dex, 7 of the Starforge, was among the first to voice the concern that was spreading through the fleet. "What guarantee do we have that this transformation would preserve what makes us who we are? How do we know we wouldn't simply be absorbed into your collective consciousness?" Dr. James Park materialized near the Zephyrian vessel, his presence radiating the calm authority of a diplomat who had negotiated agreements between beings so different they barely shared common concepts of existence. "Your concern is understandable and appropriate," he acknowledged. "Transformation always involves risk, and the changes we offer are more profound than anything your species have previously encountered. But understand that we remain individuals despite our transcendence. Our consciousness have merged in some ways, but our unique perspectives and personalities have been preserved and even enhanced." To demonstrate this point, several members of the human crew projected their individual consciousness across the space between fleets. Each presence was distinctly different, carrying the unique personality patterns and thought processes that had defined them as individuals for thousands of years. Yet they were also connected to something larger, part of a collective awareness that enhanced rather than diminished their individual capabilities. The demonstration was both reassuring and terrifying. The humans had indeed preserved their individuality, but they had also become part of something that transcended conventional understanding. They were simultaneously one and many, individual and collective, finite beings with access to infinite potential. As the two fleets maintained their positions, urgent communications raced back to the capitals of every major galactic power. Emergency sessions convened in government chambers across hundreds of worlds. Military leaders, scientists, philosophers, and religious figures gathered to debate humanity's offer and its implications for the future of galactic civilization. The discussions were heated and complex. Some argued that accepting the human offer was the natural next step in evolution, a chance to transcend the limitations that had bound organic life since its inception. Others contended that such transformation would represent the end of natural existence, as it had developed over billions of years of evolution. Religious leaders found themselves grappling with questions about the nature of the soul and consciousness. If beings could transcend physical existence while preserving their essential selves, what did that mean for traditional concepts of death and afterlife? Were the humans offering a form of technological immortality, or had they discovered something even more profound? Meanwhile, the human fleet continued its peaceful demonstration of impossible capabilities. They created temporary pocket dimensions where the laws of physics operated differently. They manifested matter from pure energy and converted energy back into exotic forms of matter that shouldn't have been able to exist. They demonstrated technologies that made the most advanced galactic civilizations look primitive by comparison. Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically to analyze and understand what she was witnessing. Her instruments detected energy patterns that followed no known scientific principles, matter configurations that existed in states of quantum superposition on a macro scale, gravitational effects that seemed to operate independently of mass and distance relationships. They're not just using advanced technology, she reported to her research team. They're manipulating the fundamental constants that govern reality itself. They've learned to treat the laws of physics as guidelines rather than absolute rules. The implications were overwhelming. If the humans could indeed alter fundamental physical constants, they possessed power that approached the mythical abilities attributed to the first beings that had achieved consciousness in the universe. They could remake matter and energy at will, create or destroy on scales that range from subatomic particles to galactic clusters. Yet they used this godlike power with restraint and wisdom that spoke to 20,000 years of growth and learning. They offered their gifts freely but refused to impose them on unwilling recipients. They demonstrated their capabilities without threat or coercion, allowing each species to make its own choice about humanity's offer. As the standoff continued, it became clear that the galaxy faced a decision that would define the next phase of cosmic evolution. The humans had returned with the power to transform existence itself, but they would only do so with the consent and cooperation of those they sought to help. The question that now faced every conscious being in the galaxy was simple yet profound. Were they ready to transcend everything they had ever been to become something unimaginably greater? Or would they choose to remain as they were, accepting the limitations and constraints of their current existence in exchange for the familiar comfort of the known? The answer would determine not just the fate of galactic civilization, but the very nature of consciousness itself throughout the universe. The first world to make its decision was Kepler Prime, a modest research colony on the outer edge of Zephyrian space. The planet housed barely 3 million inhabitants, mostly scientists and their families who had dedicated their lives to studying exotic physics and quantum mechanics. When the news of humanity's return reached their scientific community, the response was immediate and unanimous. Dr. Yara Zen, 3, the colony's chief physicist, transmitted her planet's decision directly to the human fleet. "We accept your offer," she declared, her words carrying the weight of a collective choice made by some of the galaxy's most brilliant minds. "We understand the risks, but we also understand the potential. Our entire civilization has been built on pushing the boundaries of knowledge. We're ready to push beyond the final boundary." Sarah Chen's consciousness focused on the small world with the intensity of a loving parent. When she responded, her words carried 20 millennia of compassion and understanding. "Your choice honors the spirit of exploration that has always defined conscious beings at their best," she replied. "We will begin the transformation process gradually, ensuring that each step preserves your essential nature while expanding your capabilities beyond current limitations." The transformation of Kepler Prime became a carefully orchestrated demonstration that the entire galaxy watched with fascination and terror. Human consciousness specialists, led by Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins, established a quantum resonance field around the planet. The field allowed them to begin the transcendence process while maintaining complete reversibility until the final stages. The first phase involved expanding the colonist's consciousness to perceive quantum reality directly. Scientists who had spent their careers studying subatomic particles suddenly found themselves able to observe and interact with quantum fields through direct mental contact. The experience was overwhelming at first, but the human guides provided constant support and guidance. Dr. Yara Zen, 3, was among the first to achieve stable quantum consciousness. As her awareness expanded beyond the constraints of her physical brain, she found herself able to process information at speeds that made her previous intellectual capabilities seem glacial by comparison. Mathematical concepts that had taken months to understand became immediately clear. Physical relationships that required complex calculations revealed themselves as simple, elegant patterns. "It's not just enhanced intelligence," she transmitted to the observers throughout the galaxy. "It's a completely different way of existing. I can feel the fundamental forces of the universe as directly as I once felt temperature or pressure. The boundaries between self and environment are becoming fluid, but somehow my sense of individual identity is becoming stronger, not weaker." The transformation process took 3 standard months. During this time, the colonists gradually learned to exist as both individual consciousness and as part of a greater collective awareness. Their physical bodies began to change as well, becoming capable of existing in environments that would have been instantly fatal to unmodified organic life. They could survive in vacuum, withstand radiation levels that would sterilize normal matter, and adapt to gravitational fields ranging from near zero to crushing intensity. Most remarkably, they retained their personalities, their memories, and their emotional connections to one another. Families remained families, though their relationships deepened in ways that transcended physical proximity. Scientists continued their research, though they now had access to methods of investigation that made their previous tools seem primitive. The successful transformation of Kepler Prime sent shockwaves throughout galactic civilization. Here was proof that humanity's offer was genuine and that the transcendence process preserved rather than destroyed individual identity. But it also demonstrated just how profound the changes would be. The beings on Kepler Prime were recognizably the same individuals they had been, but they were also something entirely new. Opposition to humanity's offer crystallized around the Dominion Alliance's core worlds. Emperor Vec, 9, ruler of the galaxy's most powerful military force, viewed the transformation process as an existential threat to everything his civilization represented. In an emergency session of the Dominion Senate, he argued passionately against accepting humanity's offer. "We are being asked to abandon everything that makes us who we are," he declared to the assembled senators. "These humans speak of transcendence, but what they offer is extinction. The beings on Kepler Prime may retain their memories and personalities, but they are no longer the species they once were. If we accept this transformation, we will be committing genocide against ourselves." The Emperor's words resonated with millions of beings throughout the galaxy who viewed humanity's return with suspicion and fear. Some argued that transcendence represented the ultimate fulfillment of spiritual development, the achievement of union between consciousness and universal truth. Others contended that the soul was inextricably linked to physical existence, and that transformation would represent a form of spiritual death. High Priestess Luxandra of the Celestial Harmony spoke for many when she addressed the Galactic Religious Council. "We must ask ourselves whether consciousness that exists without the constraints of physical reality can still be considered truly alive in any meaningful sense. These humans may have gained incredible power, but have they lost something essential in the process? Have they traded their souls for godlike capabilities?" The debate raged across thousands of worlds and hundreds of species. Some civilizations, inspired by the success of Kepler Prime, began preparing for their own transformation. Others reinforced their commitment to remaining in their current forms. A few attempted to find middle ground, seeking ways to gain some benefits of human technology without undergoing complete transcendence. The human fleet maintained its position at the edge of civilized space, neither advancing nor retreating. They continued their peaceful demonstrations of impossible capabilities while making it clear that they would not force their offer on anyone. Each species, each world, each individual would be free to choose their own path. Dr. James Park established diplomatic contact with representatives from every major galactic power. The negotiations were unlike anything in recorded history, as beings bound by physical limitations attempted to reach agreements with consciousness that existed beyond such constraints. Traditional concepts of territory, resources, and political power became meaningless when dealing with beings who could create matter from energy and exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "We understand your concerns," Park assured the galactic representatives during one particularly tense session. "Transformation of this magnitude cannot be undertaken lightly. We offer our knowledge and capabilities, but we also offer something equally valuable: time. There is no urgency to this decision. You may take generations to consider our offer if necessary. We have learned patience during our long journey, and we can wait as long as you need." The assurance helped ease some tensions, but it also highlighted the vast difference between human and galactic perspectives. The transcended humans thought in terms of cosmic time frames, viewing centuries as brief moments and millennia as reasonable periods for consideration. For species with lifespans measured in decades, such patience was both comforting and somewhat disturbing. As months passed, several other worlds announced their intention to undergo transformation. Each successful transcendence provided more data about the process and its effects. Patterns began to emerge that helped address some of the galaxy's concerns. The transformed beings retained their cultural identities even as they gained new capabilities. Art, music, and literature continued to flourish, though they took forms that unmodified consciousness could barely comprehend. Zephyrian mathematicians who underwent transformation created symphonies from pure mathematical relationships. Dominion architects designed structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously while maintaining perfect aesthetic harmony. Most importantly, the transformed beings showed no desire to impose their new nature on others. They became advisors and teachers for those who sought their knowledge, but they respected the choices of species that preferred to remain unchanged. The galaxy began to settle into a new equilibrium where transcended and natural consciousness coexisted in mutual respect. However, not all reactions to humanity's return were peaceful. A coalition of extremist groups, calling themselves the Pure Heritage Alliance, began organizing resistance to what they termed the consciousness contamination spreading from humanity's influence. Led by a fanatical Dominion general named Kixtor, they viewed the transformation process as an invasion that threatened the natural order of evolution. "We will not allow these so-called humans to corrupt the galaxy with their artificial transcendence," General Kixtor declared in a broadcast that reached billions of beings across dozens of worlds. "What they offer is not evolution, but devolution, a retreat from the physical reality that gave birth to consciousness itself. We call upon all natural beings to resist this contamination before it destroys everything our ancestors worked to achieve." The Pure Heritage Alliance began recruiting followers from species that felt threatened by humanity's offer. They established hidden bases on remote worlds and began developing weapons specifically designed to disrupt the quantum fields that enabled transcendent consciousness. Their research drew on classified military archives containing theoretical studies of anti-human warfare dating back thousands of years. Sarah Chun detected the Alliance's activities through the quantum resonance networks that connected transcended consciousness across the galaxy. The hostile preparations troubled her deeply, not because they posed a direct threat to humanity, but because they represented a level of fear that could lead to tragic consequences for both sides. "They're terrified that we'll force transformation upon them," she observed to her fellow consciousness during a collective planning session. "Their fear is driving them to prepare for a war that we have no intention of fighting." Marcus Rodriguez analyzed the Alliance's military preparations through the ship's enhanced tactical systems. Their weapons could indeed disrupt quantum consciousness fields, but only at close range and with massive energy expenditure. They're developing strategies based on the assumption that we'll behave like a conventional invasion force. The situation presented humanity with a complex challenge. They could easily neutralize the Alliance's threat through technological superiority, but doing so would validate the extremist fears about human intentions. Any aggressive action would undermine the trust they had worked to build with more moderate galactic governments. Elizabeth Hawkins proposed a different approach during the collective deliberation. We should demonstrate our commitment to peaceful coexistence by withdrawing some of our more impressive displays. Let the galaxy see that we're not attempting to intimidate anyone into accepting our offer. The human fleet began scaling back its technological demonstrations, allowing their ships to appear more conventionally solid, and limiting their reality-bending displays to essential communications. The change in approach helped ease tensions with moderate governments, but unfortunately emboldened the Pure Heritage Alliance to believe that their resistance efforts were having an effect. General Kixtor interpreted humanity's restraint as evidence of weakness or deception. They're hiding their true capabilities because they know we're preparing effective countermeasures, he announced to his followers. This proves that they can be stopped if we have the courage to act. The Alliance began planning a coordinated strike against the human fleet, believing that destroying the Eternal Wanderer would somehow reverse the transformations that had already taken place on worlds like Kepler Prime. Their flawed understanding of transcendent consciousness led them to assume that the transformed beings were dependent on the mothership for their continued existence. As the Alliance's plans developed, transformed beings throughout the galaxy became aware of the impending attack through their quantum connections. The transcended residents of Kepler Prime found themselves facing a terrible dilemma. They could warn the human fleet, but doing so might precipitate exactly the kind of conflict that would justify the Alliance's fears about transcendent consciousness. Dr. Yara Zen, 3, now existing as a consciousness capable of perceiving reality across multiple dimensions simultaneously, struggled with the moral implications of her expanded awareness. We can see the attack coming days before it happens, she communicated to her fellow transformed beings. Do we have an obligation to prevent it, even if intervention might escalate the situation? The question touched on fundamental issues about the responsibility that came with transcendent capabilities. The transformed beings possessed the power to prevent conflicts before they began, but using that power might validate concerns about their interference in natural galactic affairs. As the Pure Heritage Alliance continued their preparations, the galaxy watched nervously for humanity's response. Would the transcended beings use their vast capabilities to defend themselves? Would they attempt to transform their attackers against their will? Or would they find some other solution that preserved both their own existence and the principles they claimed to represent? The answer would come soon enough, as the Alliance's assault fleet moved into position for what they believed would be a decisive strike against the returning humans. Neither side fully understood what they were about to unleash, but the entire galaxy would soon learn whether transcendent consciousness and natural existence could truly coexist in peace. The Pure Heritage Alliance struck at dawn on the galactic calendar, launching their assault from 12 hidden positions scattered across the Outer Rim territories. General Kixtor had spent months perfecting his strategy, convinced that a coordinated surprise attack using quantum disruption weapons would shatter humanity's transcendent consciousness and send the survivors fleeing back into the void. 300 warships materialized from hyperspace simultaneously, their exotic matter cannons already charging for maximum effect. The weapons they carried represented the pinnacle of anti-consciousness technology, theoretical devices that had existed only in classified research documents until the Alliance's desperate scientists made them reality. All units, commence firing on my mark, General Kixtor commanded from the bridge of his flagship Purity's sword. Today we save the galaxy from contamination. Today we preserve the natural order for future generations. The quantum disruption beams lanced out across space with devastating precision, each one designed to unravel the quantum fields that enabled transcendent consciousness. The weapons struck the Eternal Wanderer and its escort vessels with energies that should have torn their impossible hulls apart and scattered their consciousness matrices back into component particles. Instead, something miraculous happened. The human ships absorbed the destructive energy and converted it into pure light that painted the void in colors that had no names. Where the Alliance expected to see explosions and debris, they witnessed a transformation so beautiful that several attack pilots stopped firing out of pure amazement. Sarah Chen's consciousness expanded to encompass the entire battle zone, her awareness touching the mind of every Alliance fighter with gentle compassion rather than anger. When she spoke, her words reached every being in the assault fleet simultaneously, carrying with them 20,000 years of wisdom and patience. Children of the galaxy, she said, her voice resonating with the harmony of cosmic truth. You strike at us from fear, not hatred. You believe we threaten what you hold most dear, and so you fight to preserve it. We understand your fear, and we honor the courage that drives you to act despite overwhelming odds. The Alliance pilots found themselves unable to continue their attack, not because their weapons had failed or their ships had been disabled, but because they suddenly understood the futility of their actions. The beings they were trying to destroy existed beyond the reach of conventional warfare. More importantly, those beings held no malice toward their attackers. General Kixtor felt his certainty crumbling as he watched his carefully planned assault transform into something resembling a light show more than a battle. Continue firing, he screamed over the communication channels. They're using psychological warfare to confuse us. Maintain the attack. But, even as he gave the orders, Kixtor found himself questioning everything he had believed about the human threat. The ships around him were not responding with overwhelming force or retaliatory strikes. Instead, they were demonstrating a restraint that spoke to wisdom rather than weakness. Dr. Elizabeth Hawkins manifested her consciousness near the Alliance flagship, her presence radiating the calm authority of a teacher addressing frightened students. When she spoke, her words bypassed the ship's communication systems and reached every mind aboard directly. General Kixtor, she said, your weapons are impressive achievements of engineering and scientific creativity. Your scientists have managed to create devices that could theoretically disrupt quantum consciousness fields under specific circumstances. However, you have made a fundamental error in your assumptions about our nature. To demonstrate her point, Elizabeth allowed the flagship sensors to detect the true nature of the human consciousness matrix. The readings that appeared on Alliance screens showed energy patterns that existed across multiple dimensions simultaneously, quantum structures so complex that they made the ship's computers overflow their processing capabilities just trying to analyze them. You have assumed that our consciousness exists in the same quantum space as your technology, Elizabeth continued. In reality, we exist primarily in dimensional frameworks that your weapons cannot reach. Your disruption beams are affecting quantum fields that we abandoned centuries ago during our transformation process. The revelation sent shock waves through the Alliance fleet. Their most advanced weapons were not merely ineffective, they were targeting the wrong dimensional space entirely. It was like trying to destroy a mountain by firing bullets at its shadow. Commander Marcus Rodriguez joined the peaceful demonstration by manifesting multiple copies of his consciousness simultaneously across the battle zone. Each copy was fully capable of independent thought and action, yet all remained connected to his primary awareness. The display made it clear that even if the Alliance weapons had been effective, destroying individual consciousness manifestations would have little impact on the transcended beings. We exist as patterns of organized information that can manifest across multiple quantum states simultaneously, Marcus explained to the increasingly bewildered Alliance forces. Destroying any individual manifestation would be like trying to delete a mathematical concept by erasing one example of its application. General Kixtor watched his grand strategy collapse into irrelevance. Every assumption he had made about humanity's vulnerabilities had been based on outdated information and wishful thinking. The beings his fleet was attacking had evolved so far beyond conventional existence that traditional warfare was simply meaningless. But, instead of despair, he found himself experiencing something unexpected: curiosity. The humans were demonstrating capabilities that redefined what was possible, yet they showed no desire to use those capabilities against their attackers. They could have easily destroyed the Alliance fleet or forced its members to undergo transformation against their will. Instead, they were taking the time to educate their enemies about the true nature of transcendent existence. Why aren't you fighting back? Kixtor asked, broadcasting his question across all frequencies. You have the power to destroy us, to force us to become like you. Why do you show restraint? Sarah Chen's consciousness focused on the general with the intensity of a parent addressing a beloved child who had made a dangerous mistake. When she responded, her words carried the weight of 20 millennia of growth and understanding. Because force cannot create genuine transcendence, she replied. Consciousness that evolves through coercion remains fundamentally limited. True transcendence requires choice, understanding, and the willing acceptance of change. We could compel your transformation, but the result would be a pale shadow of what you could become if you chose evolution freely. The answer struck at the heart of everything the Alliance had been fighting against. They had assumed that humanity's ultimate goal was conquest through forced transformation. The revelation that the humans actually preferred willing cooperation over coercion undermined the basic premise of their resistance movement. Dr. James Park materialized near several Alliance vessels simultaneously, his diplomatic experience enabling him to address each crew in terms they could understand. To the Dominion ships, he spoke of honor and the Warrior's Code. To the Zephyrian vessels, he addressed their scientific curiosity. To the smaller coalition members, he acknowledged their legitimate concerns about cultural preservation. Your alliance was formed to resist an invasion that we never intended, Park explained to each crew. You have united to fight a war that we have no desire to wage. Your courage and determination are admirable, but they are misdirected. The true threat to your civilizations comes not from us, but from your own fear of change. As the one-sided battle continued, other forces throughout the galaxy watched in amazement. Admiral Kexthane, monitoring the situation from his position near the galactic core, found himself fundamentally reassessing humanity's nature and intentions. The restraint they were showing in the face of direct attack spoke to a level of evolved consciousness that transcended anything in recorded history. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving requests from over 40 worlds asking permission to open diplomatic channels with the human fleet. The restraint they're showing during this attack is convincing previously neutral parties that their intentions are genuinely peaceful. The ironic result of the Alliance's assault was exactly the opposite of what they had intended. Instead of driving the galaxy away from humanity, their attack was demonstrating the transcended being's commitment to peaceful coexistence. Worlds that had been undecided about humanity's offer began to seriously consider the benefits of transformation. Meanwhile, the Alliance fleet found itself in an increasingly impossible position. They could not damage their targets, could not escape the battle zone, and could not continue fighting against beings who refused to fight back. Some pilots began powering down their weapons voluntarily, overwhelmed by the futility of their situation. General Kixtor faced a command decision that would define his legacy. He could order his forces to continue a pointless attack against beings who were treating them with compassion rather than anger. Or he could acknowledge that everything he had believed about the human threat was wrong, and find the courage to reconsider his position. Elizabeth Hawkins sensed the general's internal struggle and offered him something unexpected: direct access to her memories of the transformation process. Through quantum resonance, she shared with him the actual experience of transcendence, allowing him to feel firsthand what it meant to exist as evolved consciousness. For a few seconds, General Kixtor experienced reality as a transcended being. He felt the boundaries of his individual awareness expand to encompass quantum fields spanning light years. He perceived the fundamental forces of the universe as directly as he normally perceived temperature and pressure. Most importantly, he felt his own personality and memories remain intact throughout the experience, enhanced rather than diminished by the expansion of his consciousness. When the shared experience ended, Kixtor found himself fundamentally changed. He had not undergone transformation himself, but he now understood what transcendence actually entailed. The fear that had driven his resistance movement was based on complete misunderstanding of humanity's offer. All Alliance vessels, cease fire immediately, he commanded, his voice carrying new authority born of sudden understanding. We have been fighting an enemy that exists only in our own fear and ignorance. These beings offer transcendence, not conquest. They provide choice, not compulsion. The order created confusion throughout the Alliance fleet. Pilots who had spent months preparing for this battle suddenly found themselves ordered to stand down without achieving any of their objectives. Some continued firing out of momentum, while others demanded explanations for the sudden change in strategy. Dr. Yara Zen, 3, monitoring the situation from her transcended perspective on Kepler Prime, felt profound relief as the pointless conflict began to wind down. The general has chosen wisdom over fear, she observed to her fellow transformed consciousness. Perhaps this attack will ultimately serve a positive purpose by demonstrating humanity's genuine commitment to peaceful coexistence. As weapons fire gradually ceased across the battle zone, humanity began the delicate process of turning their attackers into allies. Rather than demanding surrender or reparations, they offered the Alliance forces something far more valuable: education about the true nature of transcendent consciousness and the freedom to choose their own path forward. Some Alliance members chose to return to their home worlds with new understanding of what humanity actually represented. Others requested permission to undergo transformation themselves, convinced by their first-hand experience of transcended wisdom. A few remained suspicious, but agreed to continue diplomatic discussions rather than military action. General Kixtor found himself in the unexpected position of becoming humanity's unofficial ambassador to the resistance movement. His transformation from enemy to advocate would prove crucial in convincing other fearful civilizations that transcendence represented opportunity rather than threat. The battle that was meant to drive humanity from the galaxy instead became the event that convinced most remaining holdouts to seriously consider the offer of transcendence. The Pure Heritage Alliance dissolved as an effective resistance movement, its members either choosing transformation or accepting peaceful coexistence with those who did. As the immediate crisis passed, the galaxy began to settle into a new equilibrium. Some worlds embraced transcendence enthusiastically. Others chose to remain in their current forms while maintaining friendly relations with transcended civilizations. A few isolated themselves entirely, preferring complete independence to any form of contact with evolved consciousness. But the greatest change was in the galaxy's understanding of what transcendence actually meant. Fear gave way to curiosity. Suspicion transformed into wonder. The return of humanity had not brought conquest or extinction, but rather the opening of possibilities that no one had previously imagined. The war that never truly happened had ended with the victory of understanding over ignorance, compassion over fear, and choice over compulsion. The galaxy would never be the same, but that change would come through willing transformation rather than imposed conquest. 1 year after humanity's return, the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted, not through forced conversion or conquest, but through the gradual acceptance of possibilities that had always existed but never been recognized. The transcended humans had kept their promise, offering their gifts freely while respecting every species' right to choose their own path. Sarah Chen stood in the observation chamber of the Eternal Wanderer, though stood was an imprecise term for a consciousness that could exist in multiple locations simultaneously. She was reviewing the transformation statistics that Elizabeth Hawkins had compiled, data that told the story of galactic civilization's evolution over the past 12 months. 47 worlds had chosen complete transcendence, their entire populations undergoing the transformation to quantum consciousness. Another 133 worlds had accepted partial integration, adopting human technologies while maintaining their original biological forms. The remaining inhabited systems had chosen to remain unchanged, but most maintained diplomatic relations with transcended civilizations. It's happening faster than we anticipated, Marcus Rodriguez observed, his consciousness interfacing with the ship's analytical networks. The exponential growth pattern suggests that within a decade, transcended beings will outnumber traditional biological life forms throughout the galaxy. The acceleration was driven by several factors. Each successful transformation demonstrated the preservation of individual identity and cultural values, reducing fears about loss of self. The practical benefits of transcendence, from unlimited energy production to instantaneous interstellar travel, made the choice increasingly attractive to civilizations struggling with resource limitations and technological challenges. Most importantly, the transcended beings themselves served as living proof that evolution beyond biological constraints was possible without sacrifice of essential humanity. Dr. Yara Zen, 3 had become something of a celebrity throughout the Zephyrian territories, giving lectures and demonstrations that showed how transcendent consciousness enhanced rather than replaced natural curiosity and creativity. But the transformation was not without its challenges. The Temporal Research Institute on Centaurus 7 had discovered disturbing patterns in the quantum resonance fields generated by transcended consciousness. Dr. Helen Vasquez, still operating as an unmodified human but working closely with transcended researchers, had identified potential risks that required immediate attention. The cumulative effect of so many quantum consciousness fields is beginning to influence the fundamental structure of local spacetime, she reported during a joint research session that included both transcended and natural scientists. We're seeing microfractures in dimensional barriers that could potentially destabilize reality itself if the trend continues unchecked. The discovery sent shockwaves through both transcended and natural communities. Humanity's offer of evolution came with unintended consequences that could threaten the very fabric of existence. The irony was profound. In their attempt to transcend physical limitations, conscious beings might inadvertently destroy the universe that had given birth to consciousness itself. Elizabeth Hawkins immediately began analyzing the data from her perspective as a transcended consciousness with access to dimensional frameworks beyond normal perception. What she discovered was both alarming and enlightening. The dimensional fractures are not random, she explained to the combined research teams. They're following patterns that suggest the universe itself is attempting to evolve, using our transcendence as a catalyst for cosmic-level transformation. We may not just be changing ourselves, we may be triggering the next phase of universal development. The implications were staggering. If Elizabeth's analysis was correct, the return of humanity and the subsequent wave of transcendence was not just affecting galactic civilization. It was causing the universe itself to evolve toward a new state of existence where the boundaries between consciousness and physical reality would become increasingly fluid. Sarah Chun convened an emergency council that included representatives from every major civilization, both transcended and natural. The meeting took place in a specially constructed dimensional space that allowed beings of different consciousness levels to interact as equals. The challenge they faced required wisdom from every possible perspective. We stand at a crossroads that makes our individual choices about transcendence seem small by comparison, Sarah began, her words reaching every participant simultaneously. Our evolution appears to be triggering changes that will affect the nature of existence itself throughout the universe. We must decide whether to continue on our current path or find ways to limit our impact on cosmic structure. The debate that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. Transcended beings argued that cosmic evolution was a natural process that should be allowed to proceed. Traditional biologicals contended that the risks were too great to justify continued transformation. A few voices suggested that the solution lay not in stopping transcendence, but in guiding it more carefully. General Kixtor, now serving as an advocate for peaceful coexistence, offered a perspective that surprised everyone present. Perhaps we're approaching this backwards, he suggested. Instead of asking whether we should continue transcending, we should ask whether the universe is ready for the kind of consciousness we're becoming. Maybe our role is to help reality itself evolve to accommodate new forms of awareness. The suggestion sparked intense discussion among scientists and philosophers from dozens of species. Could conscious beings actually assist in the evolution of cosmic structure itself? Was the universe developing new capabilities in response to the presence of transcended consciousness? Dr. James Park, drawing on his diplomatic experience, proposed a comprehensive research initiative that would involve both transcended and natural civilizations working together to understand and guide the cosmic changes they had triggered. We created this situation together, he pointed out. We should address it together as well. The Cosmic Evolution Project became the largest scientific endeavor in galactic history. Research stations were established at dimensional weak points throughout the galaxy, staffed by teams that included representatives from every known species. Transcended consciousness provided processing power and dimensional access, while natural beings offered perspectives uninfluenced by quantum awareness. The research revealed that the universe was indeed evolving, but not randomly. The dimensional fractures were following patterns that suggested purposeful development rather than chaotic breakdown. Reality was developing new layers of structure that could accommodate consciousness operating beyond traditional physical limitations. The universe is learning, Elizabeth Hawkins announced during a galaxy-wide broadcast. Just as conscious beings evolve and adapt to new circumstances, the cosmic structure itself is developing new capabilities in response to our transcendence. We're witnessing the birth of a truly conscious universe. The discovery fundamentally changed how every civilization viewed their role in cosmic development. They were not just inhabitants of a static universe, but active participants in its ongoing evolution. Their choices about transcendence were contributing to changes that would affect the nature of existence for billions of years to come. Some worlds found the responsibility overwhelming and chose to limit their technological development rather than risk contributing to unpredictable cosmic changes. Others embraced their role as cosmic evolution catalysts, accelerating their transcendence programs to help guide universal development. The Eternal Wanderer became the coordination center for a new kind of civilization that existed across multiple levels of reality simultaneously. Transcended beings worked alongside natural consciousness to monitor cosmic evolution and ensure that universal development proceeded in directions that would benefit all forms of awareness. Sarah Chun found herself serving as something she had never expected to become, a guardian of cosmic stability. Her consciousness, expanded across dimensional frameworks that spanned the entire galaxy, monitored the delicate balance between transcendent development and universal structure. We wanted to transcend our limitations, she reflected during a rare moment of individual contemplation. Instead, we've discovered that our limitations were part of the universe's own constraints. By evolving beyond them, we've given reality itself the opportunity to grow. The process was not without setbacks. Several dimensional incidents required emergency intervention from combined transcended natural response teams. The Sagittarius arm experienced a temporary collapse of local space-time that was only resolved through coordinated efforts from consciousness operating at multiple reality levels. But each crisis also provided new understanding of how transcended consciousness could work with universal structure rather than against it. The galaxy's civilizations learned to guide their evolution in ways that strengthened rather than strained the cosmic framework supporting their existence. 5 years after humanity's return, the galaxy had achieved a stability that balanced transcendent evolution with cosmic responsibility. New beings continued to choose transcendence, but their transformation was guided by wisdom gained through careful study of universal structure. Natural civilizations found their own roles as essential partners in cosmic development, their unmodified perspectives providing insights that transcended consciousness could not achieve alone. The Pure Heritage Alliance had evolved into the Cosmic Balance Institute, dedicated to ensuring that universal evolution proceeded at sustainable rates. General Kixtor, now serving as the Institute's director, worked closely with transcended researchers to monitor dimensional stability throughout the galaxy. Dr. Yara Zen, III established the first Academy of Transcendent Sciences, where beings from every level of consciousness could study the relationship between awareness and reality. Her research into conscious evolution became the foundation for understanding how individual transcendence contributed to universal development. The Eternal Wanderer continued its journey through the galaxy, no longer as a returning exile, but as a mobile research station dedicated to understanding the new universe that consciousness and reality were creating together. Sarah Chun and her crew had found their true purpose, not just transcending their own limitations, but helping the universe itself evolve toward its full potential. As she monitored the cosmic evolution data streaming through the ship's networks, Sarah reflected on the strange journey that had brought humanity from exile to cosmic stewardship. They had left the galaxy 20,000 years ago as refugees from a civilization that had destroyed itself. They returned as guides for a universe learning to accommodate new forms of consciousness. The ghost ship has completed its journey. She transmitted to the galaxy-wide consciousness network that now connected billions of transcended and natural beings. But the journey of cosmic evolution has just begun. We are all explorers now, mapping territories that exist beyond the boundaries of what we once thought possible. The response came from countless voices across the galaxy, transcended consciousness and natural minds, ancient civilizations, and newly evolved species, all united in their commitment to guiding universal evolution toward its greatest potential. The legend of humanity's ghost ship had become reality. But the true story was just beginning, written in the quantum structure of a universe learning to think, dream, and evolve alongside the consciousness it had given birth to so many billions of years before. In the end, humanity's return had not brought conquest or destruction. It had brought the greatest adventure of all, the chance to help the universe itself transcend its limitations and become something unimaginably greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy would never be the same, but neither would the cosmos that contained it. The age of conscious evolution had begun, and every being in the universe was invited to participate in writing its next chapter.